Arthur about the bullying. Maybe he thought that was a good thing. The last thing he wanted to do was to add to Arthur's troubles. It was while in the canteen that he was waiting to tuck into his lovely fish pie that think life changed forever. Unusually, the headmaster put his hand on his shoulder, and before he knew it, he was in the head's office and he was surrounded by a group of nervous-looking teachers with worried looks on their faces. Maybe they knew about Arthur, thought Tim, trying to grasp the situation. But the news was worse than that, far worse. The only words he could make out were crash, accident, and death. Everything was becoming unreal and blurry. How could his dad be dead, he thought, as the room seemed to spin round and round. The rest of the day went by in a blur, and when he got home, he saw his mum slumped in an armchair, and it looked like she'd aged 10 years. Tim thought sadly. Then somehow she lifted herself out of the chair, and she hugged him, and they spent the rest of their evening remembering Dad through their tears. That night Tim willed himself to sleep, but memories of Dad kept returning to haunt him, and the pain was unbearable. His chest heaved, and his pillow was wet with tears. He woke the next morning, and he went downstairs for breakfast, and it was unusually quiet. Everything that he did and saw just reminded him of his dad. He ate his breakfast in silence. His mum was still sleeping, and he decided to let her be. She had suffered enough, he thought. Tim looked at his dad's empty chair around the breakfast table, and tears filled his eyes and threatened to roll down his once innocent cheeks. Tim didn't want to go to school. He wanted to run away, but he had nowhere to run to. At least I have Arthur, he thought, and he struggled into his duffel coat, and he felt a bit like a teddy bear, but at least it was warm, he thought. Once again he was hit by a cold blast of air, and it dried his tearful eyes, and it woke him up to the day, which stretched in front of him like a huge mountain. Each step that he took went against his will. Every nerve and sinew in his body told him to jump back into bed, but he knew that wouldn't help. He had to keep going. As soon as Arthur saw him, he knew that something was wrong. Tim tried to smile, but the pain in his eyes betrayed him. "Are you okay?" said Arthur, with a concerned look on his face. "Have you run into bullies again?" he inquired. But it was worse than that. Tim sat on a log next to Arthur, and he told him the terrible news. He let the tears fall, and Arthur put his hand on his shoulder. It was hard to know what to say. Arthur's presence was a help, and Tim looked down at the cricket bat, and he remembered how happy he had been just a day before. It was funny how things could change in a moment, he thought sadly. "I'm sure we'll play again," said Arthur, "when the frost clears," and it was obvious to Tim that he wasn't just talking about the weather, but at this stage Tim couldn't imagine a bright future. Hope you enjoyed that little bit.